Welcome to our channel, Sailing Until Valhalla. This is Anthony, my fix-anything, mouthy captain, and our three crazy kids, Dean, Lance, and Rose. And I'm Stephanie, the one who makes the videos, wrangles the kids in while helping run the boat. Come along with us on our journey of exploring the world full-time on a hardened 45 sailboat, chasing the next adventure. Hi! Okay, so I am going to do a video on how I make my sourdough. I'm just gonna say right now I'm not an expert at this. I just recently started in the last couple of months making sourdough, so I'm still trying to figure it out, and it's very difficult to get it down on a boat when you're in a cold environment because wild yeast doesn't tend to thrive as well in temperatures that are below room temperature, so like above 70 degrees, and most of the time the boat is not that warm. But this is my sourdough starter. My kids named it Joey. I'm going to go ahead and feed it, and you do a 1-to-1 ratio, and so there's probably about like half a cup worth in here, and you want the consistency to be like pancake batter. If you don't have a sourdough starter, I look it up on YouTube. That's what I did to figure out how to make it depending on the environment. It took me 14 days to get mine to kick off because I'm in a colder environment. If you're in a warmer environment, it probably won't take as long, but it needs to be a 1-to-1 ratio about pancake batter consistency. And how you know that it's ready to use is the yeast, the natural yeast that you take from the air, it should rise within 2 to 8 hours. It'll double in size. So this will go from being down here, and it'll rise like all the way up to here in just like 4 to 8 hours, I would say. Usually it takes my starter around 6 hours to double in size, and it'll get really bubbly looking. And so the starter is everything with sourdough. If you don't have a strong starter, your bread won't turn out as good. Even if it does all the things that they say, like, you know, it floats in the water, it can do that and still not be a strong starter, from my understanding. But I'm gonna go ahead and feed this, and I'll show you me doing that, and then we'll go on from there once it does double in size, and I'll show you what it looks like. So when I mean this needs to be a 1-to-1 ratio, if there's about a half a cup in here, I need to add about a half a cup of water and flour to make it an equal ratio. Water is a little heavier than flour, so you probably don't want to add quite as much water. Most people online do this with a food scale. I don't have one. I don't want to waste the money on one, so I'm just going by consistency of the starter, which is the goal is to make it the consistency of pancake batter. I find it's better for it to be a little bit on the drier side than to be too liquidy, or else it just doesn't, it's not as strong if it's too liquidy. So that's half a cup right there of flour. And I didn't do quite half a cup of water. Mix it, and you have to make sure it's completely mixed in. You don't want to have chunks or clumps or anything like that. So it's definitely like pancake batter now. I will just wait for it to rise. As long as it does it within 8 hours, it's good to use. And if you're in a colder environment like me, The boat's actually fairly warm right now because we had the stove on for a while, so I probably don't need to do this time, but I will usually put it in the oven, and the pilot light keeps the oven in a very ambient temperature, and so it helps it to rise faster. But I just used the oven not that long ago, so it's a little too warm. You don't want it to be too warm or else it'll kill the yeast. So I'm just gonna leave it out on the counter this time. Okay, so it's all mixed in. So this is what it looks like. It is maybe probably a little clumpy, but I have a really hard time getting all the clumps out. It doesn't seem to matter that much, just as long as it's fairly all mixed in. But yeah, I'll show you what it looks like as it's rising too. Most people, okay honey, hold on. Most people will put like some sort of rubber band or something, but it never stays on. I did used to draw a line, but I just can kind of remember where it was at. I mean, if it rises up to here, obviously I know that it more than doubled in size, so I don't really understand why there's a need to have a rubber band. But to each their own. Okay, so the starter's had a couple of hours to rise. It's not ready to use yet because it's still domed at the top. It domes like this and then it starts to collapse, and when it starts to collapse is when you want to use it. But this is what it looks like right now. It was like to here, and it's risen all the way to here. So I'm just waiting for the dome to stop and for it to collapse. And then I will start using it in the dough, and then we can do the fermentation process and shaping and all of that, and I'll show all of that. Okay, it's starting to get a little darker now, but I just wanted to show the starter. It's starting to go down. I don't know if you can see that, but it's not a bubble anymore. It's starting to collapse, so now is when I will start to use it. So that was 1.5 cups of water, and then I'm going to mix in 2/3 cup of the starter. That's what it should look like, a webbing kind of. Starter is good and healthy and strong, it will float. See, it's floating. And then I put a teaspoon of honey in with it to kind of help feed the yeast. And then I mix that all together first, and then I'll add the rest of the ingredients. And I'm only gonna do a teaspoon. Another thing I should mention, never use bleached flour. Use either at least all-purpose unbleached flour. Apparently best is to do like organic, but it's expensive and it's hard to find. So I just am using regular all-purpose unbleached flour. That's 4 cups of flour, and the reason you use unbleached and not bleached is because there's no bacteria left in the flour for the yeast to eat if you do bleached. I don't really know even why they do bleached flour. That doesn't really make any sense to me, besides that it makes it whiter, which I don't know how that benefits anyone. but never do bleached flour with sourdough. Okay, so I have this like lightly mixed in right now. I'm going to let this sit for just a second, and I'm going to get my other ingredients together and then mix those in as well. Like cliche classic sourdough is just starter, water, salt, and flour. I have tried that. I've been successful at it, but I don't really like the taste and consistency of the bread. It's very crunchy, and the crust especially I don't really care for. And same with Tony, and we're the ones who mainly eat this. So I put also a half cup of milk, 2 tablespoons of honey, and 2 tablespoons of butter. And so what I do is I'm going to put them in a pan, basically melt the butter with the honey, then pour in the cold milk, then add that to this, and then I'll add the salt last, and then I'll mix it all together because I just really like the taste of the bread better, and just the consistency. I like the way the crust is better, the way that the bread is in general better. And the biggest thing I've learned about making bread in general is there are so many different recipes that you can try, and you can alter them to whatever like health needs you have. Like if you want it to be dairy free, it can be. The reason I even got into sourdough baking is because Tony has a severe yeast intolerance. The active dry yeast that has, mass produced, made in factories, it's not natural. His body does not do good with it at all. And so even though this still has gluten in it, he does have a gluten intolerance too, but I think his is more the yeast than the gluten because he has the sourdough bread and he doesn't get any reactions to it. So that's why I started doing it. And he doesn't have a dairy intolerance, so that's why we do the butter and the milk. I just have to say, you don't have to stick to the strict recipe that they do for sourdough. You can make any bread recipe sourdough. Just replace the starter, just replace the yeast that they use, the active dry yeast, with your starter, and you can make any recipe you want that's a bread recipe into sourdough. Okay, so now that I've put the butter and the honey in together, now I'm going to put it on the stove and melt it all together. It's kind of dark over here because I don't have, but there it is. There we go. Just enough to melt it. And we're going to do half a cup of milk. Again, this is just the recipe that I like. You don't have to do this. You can alter it if you want. And you want to make sure that if you're adding anything that you heat up, that it's not too hot when you add it, or else you'll kill the yeast. Okay, so it's warm to the touch, but I don't think it's too warm. It needs to be pretty hot for it to kill the yeast, but I'm just really overly cautious.
Down here, a little bit here. On the top, it's the slash zone. Over here, now we're in the high tide zone. Mussels. There's mussels.
And this is where I'm going to add the salt because it's really, really, really wet right now, so it'll dissolve really easily. And I do 1 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And This is a little too wet for my liking. I can tell already that it's going to be really wet, and I really hate working with high hydration sourdough, so I'm going to add more flour. It's probably good. It's a little bit on the wet side still, but I think it'll be okay. The only reason that I kind of know is just because I've done it quite a few times now, and I can tell when it's like too much water. They say there's like a mathematical way to do it. I don't have a scale, so, and I'm not going to buy one. I don't think that that's completely necessary. Like this, that's the great thing about sourdough is they started doing sourdough, like this was like the first bread that was ever made really with yeast. You can really just tell by feel. Okay. So I think that's good. It just needs to look like a ragged dough is what they say. So I'll put it over here in the light so that you can see better. Okay, so I'm done mixing it completely. It should look kind of like ragged, like a ragged kind of dough. And it will look smoother when you do a couple of what's called stretch and folds, and I'll show you what that looks like, but I'm going to let it sit for an hour, and then I will do my first stretch and fold. And they say to do 3 or 4 of them. I'm going to do like 5 because I noticed the more that you mess with the dough, the more structured it is when you go to shape it. So but yeah, I'll show you what that looks like, the first one. And so you wait a full hour for the first one, and then you're supposed to do it every half an hour after that, and do as many as you think the dough needs. I'm only going to show you the one time though. I'm not going to keep showing you because it's going to be over a long period of time, and then I'm going to let the dough sit for its bulk fermentation after that. Hi. Okay, so it's been an hour. It's getting dark now. This is definitely like a full day process, so I will show the stretch and fold, the first one that I'm going to do, and you want to wet your hand because it gets all over you. Even when I wet my hand, I still get it all over my hand, but I'll show you what stretch and folds look like. I already have to see, I already have dough on my hand. So that's what stretch and folds are. I'm gonna do this another like 3 or 4 times every half an hour now, and then I'm gonna let it sit overnight, and I'm just gonna let it sit out on the counter. I've tried in the fridge, I've tried in the oven with the pilot light on. In the oven with pilot light on, by the time it's morning time, it is overproofed and it's lost its rise. Overproofing is when the yeast will get to its peak, it'll double in size, and then it'll deflate, and then it won't rise when you cook it. You have to catch it when it's before the peak, and then you're supposed to bake it, or else it'll just be flat like a pancake and it'll be really dense. I've done it. It sucks. It's a huge waste of bread. It's better to even for it to be underproof than overproof, because underproofed it'll still rise and it's still edible. So yeah, but I'll show you what it looks like in the morning when it's risen. Okay, so I did the final stretch and fold. This is what the dough looks like, and now I'm going to let it sit overnight. I'm putting a plastic cover on the bowl. I've tried the cloth before and they don't keep the air out enough, and it gets like this really hard crust over it, so and it makes the loaf kind of weird when you cook it, so I air seal it. But I will show how much it rises when I wake up in the morning. It's now time to take the dough out of the bowl, and how I knew this was when you touch the dough, it shouldn't be sticky at all, and it should be very easy to pull out of the bowl. Now for stretching out the dough and getting it ready to be shaped. This is the technique that I use. There are many other techniques to use, but this was the one that I find easiest. I use brown rice and sprinkle it over. It really helps to prevent the dough from sticking to the cloth of the bowl, for it to be able to sit in the fridge for another 2 hours. Morning. Okay, so I'm being quiet because the kids are still sleeping, but I'm preheating the oven now. You want the oven to be really hot. I've noticed that the bread rises much better when the oven's scalding hot before you put it in there, and they say you should have a Dutch oven. I don't have one. I don't want to pay the money for one, so I've been using this. I just use one of these like baking pans as a lid, and I use this like big saucepan as the bottom, and I leave it in the oven. I leave it in the oven while it's preheating, to make it also very scalding hot, and then I will pull the bread out of the fridge, and I'll do the scoring on it, and I'll show you how I do that. I'm not good at it, so I'm not going to claim that I know what I'm doing. I'm still trying to figure that out. And then I'll throw it in there, and I usually put a little bit of water in it too to create some moisture to also help with the rise too. Okay, so the reason that I put so much flour on the top is because the drier the top is, the easier it is to score it or cut it. And you do have to score it. It doesn't turn out right if you don't. I don't know the science behind that, but you're just supposed to. And they say you can use a knife to score it, but I've tried and our knives aren't sharp enough and they don't work at all. So I did buy one of these. It's just a razor blade basically attached to a stick, but it's called a scorer, but you could just use a razor blade. I don't do anything fancy crazy with it because I'm not that artistic. So now it's time to go in the oven. And I'm just gonna put a tiny bit of water in it, and then I'll throw it in the oven. Okay, so the reason I didn't mention a temperature for the oven is because our oven, because we're on a boat, it runs much cooler. The temperature is not very regulated. It's propane heat, and it's just an older stove, so it doesn't keep, the temperature is not correct as for what it says when I set it for the temperature that I want it at. We put a thermometer in there and it's like way off. So you should be cooking it at least 450 degrees. The hottest I can get this oven is like 400, so it takes me longer to cook the bread, but you do want it to be hot or else you won't get that rise as much, and you want it to be scalding hot before you put it in there. I can still get the rise, it would be a lot easier for me if the oven was hotter. I set it to like 500, but it really doesn't, it can be cooked at like 425, 450. So I know some women do 500, but I cannot get the oven that hot. And it's usually 20 minutes covered to keep the moisture in there, and then the rest of the time, which I think is about 40 minutes, uncovered. From what I have looked online though, you could cover it the entire time if you want to. You could not cover it at all. It's really up to you and how you like the crust. It's been in the oven for a while now. I'm gonna go ahead and take the lid off of it, my makeshift lid, and let it cook for the rest of the way. But I wanted to show what it looks like right now. I have noticed that my loaves don't get the dramatic ear like other people you'll see online, and I've learned that that's because my oven doesn't get hot enough, and I don't have it in like a very super sealed, like a Dutch oven. So it's really hard for me to get that to happen. It has to be like ideal temperature, and it doesn't change the flavor, honestly. So, and that's all that matters. But I'll show you the finished product when it's done, and then I'll show you what it looks like on the inside after it's cooled off.
It was intact, man. We're gonna just log them off. If they would just castrate me like a bull, I would have been fine. Oh no! Come on, man. You gotta tell me.
I didn't get all of it. Just the castrating part. Okay, I'm pulling the dough out now, or the bread. Look how perfect it is.
Never seen a better sourdough in my life.
It says it's rolled butter.
Holy shit! That's a nice sourdough. Is that better?
I have a little bit of an obsession with it at this point. It's like kind of a hobby.
Lifestyle.
It's a hot lifestyle, yeah.
It's not bread.
But yeah, I will show it when it's cut, but this is what it looks like cooked. Actually, I'll pull it out of the pan. It looks so pretty. Yeah, but that's actually one of the best ones that I've had turn out so far.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, I think I really got the proofing down this time. It's really difficult to figure out how long it needs to sit for because of temperature. That really is like the deciding factor, and boats are all over the place because of especially during the winter. So it was like 59 in here throughout the night, and now it's well, it's 69 in here, so it changes pretty drastically. But with it being around in the mid to low 60s, and I had it sit up on the counter all that time for 14 hours, and in my opinion, it turned out perfect the way that it's exactly supposed to. But you do have to take into account, if you're in a warmer environment, you don't have to let it sit as long, or if you're in a colder environment, it may have to sit for even longer. So it really just depends. Now for the moment of truth.
Wait, that not yow. That not yow, it's Mama.
I look at people and I wonder all day, who are you and you are not the one in your way. And then I think about myself and I stayed. I'm a pretty boss who gonna ship
I think it's perfect. And it'll taste so good. Okay, so that's what they look like cut. I tend to like my sourdough a little bit more dense, so that I can actually use it for sandwiches and stuff without everything falling through the holes. And I just like the taste of it better this way. I know to like sourdough gurus or whatever, that's probably not like the most perfect loaf, but this is how we like it. So, and I think that's all that matters. But yeah, if you want to try this, and this is how I'm able to get it done on a boat. It's a lot harder to make sourdough on a boat, again, because the temperature is never just the same all the time, like in a house where you can set a certain temperature constant. It's just never going to be like that. So we make do with what we have, and it works. Please like, comment, and share this video. It really does help push our videos, and of course subscribe. And thank you guys so much for watching our videos. We do really appreciate it.